They came one by one, no chains, no soldiers forcing them forward, just a quiet understanding that they had no choice. In the open space of the field of Mars, the Campus Martius, men stood waiting, their names, their wealth, their families, about to be recorded, not for memory, but for control. A scribe dipped his stylus, a name was spoken, a life, reduced to numbers, property, status, obligation, everything that defined a Roman citizen, stripped down and written into the system. There was no hiding, no disappearing into the crowd, because Rome did not need to see you, to know you. It already did. This was not just a count. It was a ritual, a judgment, a moment where the state looked directly at its people and decided what they were worth. And once your name was written, it followed you into war, into tax, into law, into punishment. They called it the census. But it was something far more powerful than counting. It was the foundation of control. In the structure of the Roman Republic, power was rarely exercised through a single visible force. It was embedded in systems, quiet, organized, and persistent. Among the most influential of these systems was the census, a process that at first glance appeared administrative, almost mundane. Yet beneath its orderly surface lay one of the most effective tools of governance ever developed by the Roman state. The census was traditionally overseen by officials known as censors, magistrates entrusted with responsibilities that extended far beyond simple record-keeping. Among them were figures like Appius Claudius Caecus, who helped shape the role into something deeply influential. The censors were tasked not only with counting citizens, but with evaluating them. Their authority reached into the moral and social fabric of Rome itself. Every 5 years, Roman citizens were required to present themselves for registration. This process took place in the Campus Martius, an open space that became a stage for one of the most revealing rituals of Roman life. Citizens would declare their names, family members, property, and wealth. These declarations were not optional. They formed the basis upon which Rome organized its society. From this information, the state determined military obligations, tax responsibilities, and social classification. The census divided citizens into classes based on wealth, creating a hierarchy that influenced nearly every aspect of public life. Those with greater resources were expected to contribute more, in taxes, in equipment for military service, and in political participation. Those with less were placed lower in the structure, their influence limited. This was not simply economic categorization. It was a system that defined identity. A man's place in the census determined his role in the army, his voting power, and his standing within the community. It shaped how others saw him, and how the state used him. In this way, the census functioned as a mechanism of control. It allowed Rome to know its population in detail, not just in numbers, but in capabilities. The state could assess how many soldiers it could raise, how much revenue it could collect, and how resources could be distributed. Nothing was left entirely unknown, yet the power of the census extended beyond logistics. The censors also held the authority to enforce moral standards. Through a practice known as nota censoria, they could mark individuals for behavior considered improper or dishonorable. This could result in loss of status, removal from the Senate, or reassignment to a lower class. Reputation in Rome was not entirely private. It could be recorded and judged. This aspect of the census added another layer of control. Citizens were not only accountable for their wealth and obligations, but for their conduct. The state did not simply organize society, it evaluated it. In times of expansion, the census became even more significant. As Rome's territory grew, so did its population. Incorporating new citizens, allies, and subjects required a system capable of managing diversity and scale. The census provided that structure. It allowed Rome to integrate conquered peoples into its system, assigning them roles and responsibilities within the broader framework of the empire. However, this integration was not equal. Citizenship itself was a controlled status granted selectively. The census reinforced these distinctions, separating full citizens from allies, freedmen, and slaves. Each group existed within the system, but not on the same level. This stratification ensured that control remained centralized. By defining categories, Rome maintained order, but also reinforced hierarchy. During the transition from republic to empire, the census adapted rather than disappeared. Under rulers like Augustus, the process became more formalized, extending across provinces and incorporating vast populations beyond Italy. The emperor used the census to consolidate power, ensuring that the state had accurate information about its resources and people. It became a tool not just of administration, but of imperial oversight. In the provinces, censuses could be met with resistance. Being counted meant being taxed, conscripted, or controlled. It meant becoming visible to a distant authority. In some regions, this visibility was unwelcome. Yet the system persisted, expanding alongside the empire itself. The Roman census was not unique in the ancient world, but its scale and integration were remarkable. It combined administrative efficiency with social control, creating a structure that supported one of the most complex states of its time. It allowed Rome to function, to expand, and to maintain order across vast distances. But it also revealed something deeper about Roman governance. Power did not always rely on force. It could operate through knowledge, through organization, through the quiet act of recording a name. And once that name was written, it became part of something larger. A system that would define not just the state, but the lives within it. Once your name was written, it did not disappear, it stayed. In Rome, the census was not a single moment. It was a shadow that followed you, quiet, unseen, but always present. After registration in the Campus Martius, the information did not simply rest in records. It moved through offices, through officials, through the structure of the state itself. It became part of a system that decided what each person owed, and what each person could become. A man's wealth determined his place determined his duty, and his duty could determine his fate. In the army, the census spoke first. Roman military service was not random. It was calculated. Those with greater wealth were expected to provide better equipment, armor, weapons, horses. They stood at the front lines not only because of training, but because the system placed them there. The poorer citizens filled the lower ranks. Less protected, more exposed, more expendable. The census did not just count soldiers, it arranged them. And in times of war, that arrangement meant survival for some and death for others. Beyond the battlefield, the census reached into daily life in ways that were less visible, but no less powerful. Taxation, for example, relied entirely on these records. The state knew what you owned: land, property, livestock. And from that knowledge came obligation. There was no anonymity, no hidden wealth, at least not without risk, because false declarations could be punished, and punishment could be severe. In some cases, those who failed to register properly could be reduced in status, stripped of rights, removed from their class. In extreme situations, even sold into slavery. The system did not simply encourage honesty, it enforced it. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the census was not what it demanded, but what it revealed. The censors, men like Appius Claudius Caecus, did not only record numbers, they judged character. Through the nota censoria, they could mark individuals as morally deficient, a label that carried real consequences. A senator could be expelled. A citizen could lose status. A reputation could be damaged permanently. There was no appeal to emotion, No room for personal explanation. Only the judgment of the state, and once marked, that judgment followed you. As Rome expanded, the system stretched across vast territories. Under Augustus, the census evolved into something even more structured. It was no longer limited to the city of Rome or even Italy. It extended into the provinces, reaching populations who had never before been part of such an organized system. To be counted was to be claimed. For many, this was not a privilege. It was a burden. In distant regions, the arrival of Roman officials conducting a census was often met with unease. It meant new taxes, new obligations, new oversight from a power that felt distant and absolute. In some cases, resistance followed, not always openly, but quietly, through avoidance, through concealment, through refusal. Yet Rome persisted, because the census was not just about control in the present, it was about control in the future. By recording generations, families, children, inheritances, the state could track change over time. It could predict growth, measure decline, adjust its systems accordingly. It turned people into patterns, lives into data, and data into power. But even the most powerful systems have limits. The census relied on participation, on compliance, on the belief or the fear that the system could not be escaped. And for most, it could not. Still, beneath the structure, beneath the order, there remained something deeply human. Each name recorded was a life, a family, a story. But in the eyes of the state, it became something else, something simpler, something easier to control, a number. Rome did not need to watch every citizen. It only needed to know them. The census was not loud. It did not march through the streets with soldiers or banners. It worked quietly, methodically, turning identity into record, turning people into structure. It defined who mattered, who served, who paid, who could rise, and who could not. To be counted in Rome was to exist within its system. To be unseen was to exist outside it. And outside Rome, there was nothing. There was no escape from what had been written. Your name, your status, your worth, all fixed by the state. The Roman census helped build one of the most powerful empires in history. It gave Rome knowledge, control, order, but it also revealed something deeper. That power does not always come from force. Sometimes it comes from knowing exactly who you are and deciding what that means, because in Rome, you were not just alive. You were recorded.